In response to the Great Mississippi River flood of 1927 that displaced over 600,000, 200,000 of whom were poor minorities, American poet Robert Lee Frost wrote, "Blood has been harder to dam back than water. Just when we think we have it impounded safe behind new barrier walls and let it chafe, it breaks away in some new kind of slaughter." Following the 1927 flood, then President Herbert Hoover did little to help the African Americans, sparking the migration north to more industrialized cities, led many blacks to leave the Republican Party, and changed the face of politics for a century. This week's natural disaster in Texas, especially the Houston area, is a result not just of bad luck and increasingly violent storms, but a political failing, both to the residents of Texas and to the land itself. So what happened? Well, part of the problem can be traced back to excessive, unregulated housing development in wetland areas. Nearly 6.5 million people currently reside in the Houston, Woodlands, Sugarland area that makes up the metropolitan area, including and surrounding the city of Houston, up from around 4 million people just 20 years ago. More people coming to Houston to pursue jobs in the booming energy, healthcare, and aerospace and biomedical fields meant the need for more housing and construction workers who would also need housing. Despite federal regulations governing the destruction of wetlands or saturated lands made up of marshes or swamps, Houston has seen over 50,000 acres of wetlands destroyed or paved over in the last 20 years. Houston's Fort Bend County saw a 53% increase in impervious surfaces like asphalt and concrete between 2001 and 2011. During the same time period, Harris County saw a 26% increase, and the Katy Prairie area saw a 17% increase. Of course, Houston needed homes. No one can deny that, but where and how those homes were built and the infrastructure around it has put the entire Houston area and its two-decade economic boom in serious jeopardy. See, wetlands aren't just smelly places where mosquitoes live. They play an incredibly important role in the abatement of floodwaters. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how does wetland help in a flood? Well, wetlands act as natural sponges that hold and slowly disperse things like rain, snow melt, groundwater, and most importantly, floodwaters. According to the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, natural ground cover like wetlands creates just 10% runoff, with the rest being absorbed in the air, ground, and into the water table. But with impervious ground cover like concrete, you get over 50% runoff, with only 15% absorbing into the ground and water tables. This means that the very flat city of Houston is covered in asphalt and concrete to such an extent that when heavy rains and storms come, which are more frequent, there just isn't anywhere for the water to go, so it sits, destroying homes and lives. Regulation should have done its job, but as with most environmental regulations, no one is overseeing the implementation or administering punishment to those who break these regulations, and a lot of people are breaking those regulations. In 1989, it became federal policy that there would be no net loss to wetlands in the United States. That means that if developers want to pave over a marsh, they have to get a special permit, and they must create mitigation for the loss. 2 years ago, the Houston Chronicle found that over half of the permit records they reviewed showed little to no evidence of compliance with federal wetlands mandates. Compliance could be as little as just creating retention ponds. They also found that since 1990, the Army Corps of Engineers has issued over 7,000 permits to destroy wetlands in the Houston area. And they are in no position, due to budget and local politics, to change that. Right before retiring after 18 years heading Houston's Harris County Flood Control District, Mike Talbot told ProPublica last fall that his office had no plans to study the effects of climate change, that he doesn't believe in the scientific evidence that shows that development is making flooding worse, and asserts that the idea that these magical sponges out in the prairie would have absorbed all that water is absurd. Here's the thing. Those retention ponds, gutters, and sewers are designed based on the science and natural activities of those magical sponges we call wetlands. And while Houston hired a flood czar last year, that guy hasn't gotten a budget or any staff since his appointment in May. In addition, Republicans in Congress are laser focused on removing even more environmental regulations to building and housing development. And with Democrats more interested in clutching to conspiracy theories than protecting lives and the environment, it doesn't seem like Washington's swamp will be very useful and bringing back the swamps we need.
Most definitely true, Tabitha. In fact, I'll add on to that brilliant breakdown that you gave of what's going on in Houston by also saying that the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service did an inventory back in 1992 regarding wetlands being converted to other uses and found that between 82 and 1992, around 57% of U.S. wetlands had already been converted into developments. That's incredible. In fact, my father's political career, we want to get personal, my father's political career was based on trying to save a wetland in the neighborhood that I grew up in. When he ran for mayor of Brooklyn Park back in the May of 1990, he was doing it because the city wanted to put in curb and gutters and storm sewers and basically pave everything over when we already had ditches in a wetland that act as a natural system for water to go in heavy storms. This is a problem that we've been ignoring, and now it's coming full circle around to bite us in the butt. It's terrible. Terrible.
Yeah. And this is the thing. It's not just about the flood, and it's, you know, we can do a lot of things to mitigate, and we can do a lot of things to help people in these kinds of disasters. And whether it's climate change or not, it doesn't really matter. This is what matters, is what happened in Houston. And the fact is, it's story after story every year in the Houston Chronicle and all of these papers saying, this is a problem, this is a problem. We've been told since we were a kid for 20 years, save the wetlands, save the wetlands. Why? Because it keeps your house from flooding.
Yeah.
It's very simple. And the other problem that arises is that only 15%, it's estimated, of people who live in Houston of Houston homeowners have flood insurance. And flood insurance comes out of this federal program that, sadly, that underwrites most things, the National Flood Insurance Program. The problem with that program is it's completely out of date with its floodplain information. Also, it's heavily in debt. Government program, heavily in debt. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
So it could collapse, is what I'm saying. But the problem is that it doesn't have enough money because they need more studies to update the information on floodplains. Problem, the new administration is saying they want to cut $190 million from that program. And that $190 million is exactly what the cost to update the information on floodplains.
It's truly...
So we're just going in circles because of politics while people's homes are destroyed.
It's truly despicable. And once again, it goes back to one of our issues that we talk about here all the time when watching the Hawks is lack of infrastructure and lack of caring about infrastructure and wanting to spend money on infrastructure and wanting to update infrastructure, which I will tell to everyone here in the U.S. and everyone around the world, infrastructure is going to be about the only thing that can help at least delay the effects of climate change, whether you believe it's man-made or not, that's happening all around us. And Houston's a good example. Wetlands were destroyed, not replaced adequately. Here's the major problem you got. Now, of course, there's other mitigating factors, too, that can be argued, but not having a place for the water to go is a pretty big one. All right.
Telling Mother Nature you can do it better, not a great idea.